Hello, everyone. You have just tuned on to the Speakers Bureau, St. Lucie County Public Schools Speakers Bureau, and we are here. This is our 5th year of bringing speakers to our community, to our students, to share their life story. So we have a very special opportunity now to have some of our speakers come to our media center here, the Public School Media Center, to be recorded and to share their life story with not only our students at a particular school, but all of our students here in St. Lucie County, as well as their families, as well as community people in our county. So we're really excited about this. Today, and I'm Dr. Mills. I'm one of the school board, one of 5 school board members, and I am so blessed to be able to host this program. Today, we have a very special individual that we are so grateful to have here in St. Lucie County Public Schools, Dr. Rafael Sanchez, and he is our Executive Director over our Human Resource Department. Dr. Sanchez, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being willing to share your story. We want successful people to come and be able to help others get to where we're at, especially our children. And through our stories, we want to motivate and encourage and inspire our students all over this district, no matter what lifestyle they have, we want a variety of speakers so that everybody can relate and they can move forward in their own lives. So this is all about you, all about being able to help you succeed or maintain or wherever you are in life, because some of you that may be listening may not be students of St. Lucie County. You may be parents, or you may be community partners, or just an individual out there that needs this type of motivation. So that is what the goal is. Again, Dr. Sanchez, thank you for coming. And would you please start out by telling us, what do you do as the Executive Director over Human Resource in St. Lucie County Schools?
Right. Well, good morning, Dr. Mills, and
Good
thank
morning.
you for having me. You know, I've always enjoyed our conversations because we've had quite a few powerful conversations just amongst each other. So
Yes.
this is a good platform for continue telling that story. So, you know, my name is Dr. Rafael Sanchez, Jr. I am the Executive Director of Human Resources for St. Lucie County Schools. And what that entails is I'm in charge of all of the recruiting, also in charge of all the operational management that goes on with human resources, that integrates with payroll, which also integrates with our benefits and our risk. And I also am the chief negotiator for the CWA union. So we also help negotiate the contracts that we have with the union employees. And also I'm in charge of employee relations, which handles all types of misconduct or behavior that the school system has to deal with on a regular basis.
Wow, you have a heavy job.
It's fun. Yeah, it's a soap opera.
It's only, I was going to say, it's only fun if you were meant to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting you would say it's a soap opera. I'm in a few places myself where I get a lot of laughs because either you're able to take things more lightly because you have such a heavy responsibility, or it can really pull you down and hold you down,
Right.
you know, and discourage and all that other stuff because you have a very heavy responsibility. But to be able to see things with a lighter heart and a lighter mindset can really help us enjoy what we do. We talked earlier about the importance of understanding that nothing has to be, and that we are so blessed to be able to be doing what we do and having what we have, because so many people do not have that. And when we look into our own life stories, we know that it doesn't have to be, because we come from one type of life and we have built another life for ourselves.
Yeah.
So tell me now, what can you share with us about what it was like being a child, your life? And as I said to our last guest, you know, we want to get all into your business so that we can find out your secrets to success in spite of, okay?
Right.
So can you share what it was like for you as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult? Any challenges that you might have had?
Sure, sure. Originally born in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Lived in an area called Flatbush in Brooklyn, East 36th Street.
Go Flatbush,
Yeah,
Brooklyn.
yeah. And you know, I'm one of three, so I'm the oldest child of three. I've got a younger brother and a younger sister, and we moved to Florida when I was very young, 7 years old.
Okay.
And the reason why we moved, though, and how I found myself in Florida was just because of the relationship my mother and father had. So my father was an alcoholic and a severe manic depressive.
Okay.
And we found ourselves when he was having manic depressives of even being manic or depressed, you know, getting away from that. And in that process, that's how we ended up in Florida. You know, eventually my father did move down to Florida. And, you know, he was still an alcoholic, still a manic depressive. And so I grew up.
So your mom left him, and then they got back together.
Oh, yeah.
But he was not changed. He was still the
That's correct.
same individual.
Yeah, yeah. And this process went on all the way through, you know, from birth, because my father took his first drink on his wedding night. And from that first drink on his wedding night, he became an alcoholic.
Wow.
And he didn't get married till he was 23. Okay. So, and you know, his brothers became alcoholics as well too. His father was an alcoholic as well. And then from the drinking, the heavy drinking, he became a manic depressive. So, which required severe, heavy medication to be stabilized. And so we would go through bouts where, you know, he wasn't drinking, but he may not have been taking his medication, and it's a whole other different story when watching someone become manic or someone go through a bout of depression, and they can last for a long time. So you know, I've moved several times in the middle of the night. I know what it's like to come home and your parents are arguing or trying to, you know, break up fights. You know, I know what it's like when the police show up at your front door. You know, I know what it's like to you know, have to go and get a parent out of jail, or go look for a parent, not knowing where they're at, not knowing if they're okay. And you know, by the time, and so that was the home front. And you know, I'm a very reserved and quiet person. You know, I'm not shy, but I'm a man of few words. And you know, the home life is I guess what defined that, because I spent a lot of time in my room. And you know, from that I got involved in music, DJing, you know, just finding other avenues to either not be home or not be in the middle of what was going on. Played a lot of sports, played basketball, but you know, it's not just what was at home, it's with the surrounding family that I had as well. Because not only, you know, was my father an alcoholic and a manic depressive, so were his two brothers.
Wow, yeah. And no doubt we have students all over this county.
Oh, yeah.
That are growing up in that type of surrounding.
Right. And you know, I think that the challenging thing is to remember that, especially for our students, because I was one of them. School's not the problem. It's when you go home. And that's where the challenge becomes. What's going to happen when I go home today? And that's where it becomes a little bit challenging. And our students have other problems too. You know, am I going to eat when I go home today? So there's a bunch of challenges that are out there.
Yeah, and they're so real.
Yeah.
I think sometimes those of us that have more, we forget.
Yeah.
Or we can't relate, because after you have more, you get used to that.
You do.
And you look like, you know, I look at my grandchildren and how they have all of their grandparents supporting them, and they live a certain way, you know, a certain lifestyle, and they know how much they're loved and supported. And they have no clue of what children such as what you grew up under, and my own life story. I tell them, I impart that to them because I want them to know this is not just a given that you're supposed to have.
Right.
This is a gift that you have here, and it's important that you take that gift and build on it because I didn't have that. So, but we have students all over this county that and beyond that are going through similar things, and they feel there's really no hope for them, and it tears down their self-esteem. So we are so glad that you're here today and you're being open with us so that our students can understand that they too can overcome their obstacles. As children, they don't have that many opportunities because they're not independent yet. But one day, they're going to be old enough to make then their decision, and how important those decisions are. But even as children in elementary school, it's important for them to understand they do have some power. They do have the power to learn their lessons, do what they can to learn what the teachers are teaching, look at their school as their first job, and how that's going to pay off if they work as hard as they can at their academics and also with their social skills and with their character building. But please go on with that story.
Yeah, and you know, school is a safe place.
For so many.
For a lot of us. It's a place to escape. It's a place to you know, we feed our kids. And it's a place to not have to worry about what's waiting at home for them in a lot of cases. So it's
and that was your case?
It was my case.
School was your safe place?
Yeah, it was a safe place. I didn't miss a lot of school because, you know, I would rather be at school than be at home.
Yes.
And so that you know, was a safe place for me.
I had one speaker who said they were so poor and a single mom raising them, and school was the place where they could eat.
Of course.
And he said he couldn't wait to get to school. Because he loved to eat the food. You know, he's a big man now. So,
And I've visited schools where, you know, right when school's getting ready to be open, and I remember this vividly, and this was in Orlando, Florida, when I was working in HR there, and I was meeting with the principal, and this little girl came in a little bit late. You know, school's getting ready to start, and it was 100% free and reduced school. So she was crying. She was beside herself. And when the principal asked her, hey, what's the matter? She said, I'm hungry. I haven't eaten since yesterday. And so, you know, we have to remind ourselves that, you know, first the parents are responsible for taking care of the kids and giving them the best they can. But sometimes they're not able to do so. And so a lot of our students, they get breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even now, you know, food for the weekend to take home.
Yes, we do have a program like that. Yeah,
that's right. And they're powerful. And even though my situation wasn't great at home, I always had food on the table, so I didn't have to worry about that.
Right.
You know, that's one thing to be you know, to be highly grateful for. But also while growing up on my mother's side of the family, so my dad is one of 6.
Okay.
My mother is one of 8. Okay. And all 3 of her brothers were also alcoholics as well, including her uncle as well. So, you know, my grandfather was as well. So I come from a very long line of substance abuse in the family. And 4 of my uncles on both sides were buried by the time I was 15. Yeah.
Because of the effects of alcoholism?
Because of alcohol. One of them transitioned from being an alcoholic to a heroin addict. And while he was doing that, you know, in the 80s and 90s, he used heroin with dirty needles, and he contracted AIDS.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, in that process, he gave it to my aunt. And, you know, my cousin was born with AIDS as well.
Oh, my God, yeah.
So, you know, all of them passed away. And so, you know, I went through, I'm 45 now, and I've been to a lot of funerals. 3 of them I can say were of natural causes. You know, the rest had to do with some type of substance abuse or some type of drug abuse.
So in other words, the rest making the wrong decisions.
Well, it is.
And that's
it
what
is.
happens
Yeah.
if we go down a
Yeah.
certain path.
Yeah.
There's nothing but destruction down that path.
Right.
You know, if we go through down another path, that's success. It really is the paths that we take in life.
And I think it's
As
the lessons that we learn along
Yes.
the way too, along that journey. And one of the most powerful lessons I learned, not only from my father but my family, is that, you know, the people who are supposed to love you and take care of you, sometimes they're not able to. And that could be for a lot of reasons.
That's right.
You know, it could be that they don't know how. It could be because of some type of a substance abuse or alcohol abuse or drug abuse or whatever it is. And in my father's case, it was, you know, alcohol and a mental disability that didn't allow him to take care or be there for his family like he should have. And what's ironic is that, you know, you're always an alcoholic, but he doesn't drink anymore. And
Right.
you know, he's proud to
Yeah.
say that, you know, he counts his birthdays by how many years he's been sober.
Well, like you said earlier, for so many of alcoholics, it's that first drink.
Yeah.
And if they
Yeah.
if they don't do that, you know, and especially if it runs through the family and so
Right.
forth, as you're talking about, not to drink, just don't drink.
Right.
Because and this is with young people that just starting their lives. You said he was 23 years old when he had his
Yeah.
first drink, but there was a whole history of alcoholism there,
Right.
and that first drink triggered for him. So substance alcohol is a drug. It's a free drug, but it's still a drug, and these things you have to be very careful with handling the different type of drugs, even prescription drugs. You have to be very careful. You cannot abuse drugs, and that's what I'm hearing from you, because there are consequences to drug abuse. Now, if indeed that is your situation right now, where you have abused drugs, you can learn lessons from that, and you can still turn your life around. As you said, your dad is no longer an alcoholic.
Yeah.
He recognizes that he is, because if he takes that first drink, there's trouble.
Right.
So he stays away from that. But tell us a little bit more. We're going to go a little different here.
Sure.
Because I happen to know a little bit more about your story. You've come several times and
Right.
you've spoke before the audience of students in the different schools for the Speakers Bureau.
Right.
And you mentioned a story that really resonated to the young people as well as myself when you told us about an uncle of yours that was into doing
Right.
certain things, and how much you looked up to that uncle, and actually because of something your mother told you and because of you listening, you could possibly be here today, because
Yeah.
you could have lost your
Yeah.
life. Would you tell us about that?
Sure. You know, these journeys or these things that happen to us as kids, I think, one, they don't necessarily need to define us or who we are, but they teach you lessons. You know, another lesson that I learned was, just because we're family, we're friends, we're from the same neighborhood, we're cousins, or whatever it is, doesn't mean that I will stand next to you. And there's a lot of reasons why. And, you know, and in my case, you know, I learned at a very young age that lesson. And, you know, my uncle, who was my mother's older brother, was he was not there and all the time on the block, but when he did come out, he would buy the entire block ice cream. And you know, I always vividly remember my mother and her sisters telling me, like, you know, when your uncle comes out there, you need to come inside.
And how old are you at this time?
Oh, about 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And, you know, I couldn't understand it. I wanted ice cream. Everyone's getting ice cream. I want ice cream. And I didn't understand it, but, you know, he had bought us ice cream, and the next time when she found out, she had said, when he's out there, you need to come inside and, you know, let me come and tell me if he wants to buy ice cream, and we'll figure something out. So he did come back, and my uncle had just came back to the neighborhood because he had just gotten out of jail for murder.
Okay. Now he just got out of jail for murder, and he's buying. When he comes through, he's buying everybody ice cream. Something is up
money,
here,
right?
Okay.
He's got a bunch of money, and everyone knows. And I didn't know, but
No.
where everyone knows if you're a drug dealer, or everyone knows if you're into something that's no good. Especially if you're in a community or you live in a tight community. And that was my uncle's case. So this one day, he comes out and he's buying, all the kids ice cream. And, I run inside to ask my mom. And in the process of running inside to ask, I can hear gunshots. When I look back, I can see him shooting back at someone who's trying to shoot at him. And so it was a powerful lesson. And I'll tell you, to this day, I never spoke to him again after that. Because that lesson was, just because we're family doesn't mean I'll stand next to you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And and I took that along growing up, even through high school. When he passed away, because he passed away in my teens, maybe early 20s, I never spoke to him again. I never stood next to him again. And when he would come around, I would, I'd wave, but I'd go the other direction, because I can't trust that my safety is going to be there.
Right.
I can't entrust you with my safety.
Yeah. What a powerful lesson that all of us can learn, especially our children and our students, that just because your family, just because that's your cousin or your uncle or even your mother or your father, just because your family doesn't mean we have to do what family members are doing. If it's wrong and if it's going to, if it's being destructive, then if we don't want to go down that path, we do as much. We can still love them, and we do.
That's right.
But we cannot walk with them, because we cannot get to where we're going if we walk their way and their path, which is not positive or beneficial for our lives in the long run.
And I think that's one of the most powerful lessons. If I could tell our kids in the community, that's one of the biggest lessons you can learn. And in a lot of cases, it's going to be their friends, or it's going to be someone that they're very familiar with, that they're very close with. And just because they're going down a certain path doesn't mean I have to go with you. And in another lesson, the same lesson is just because we're family, we're friends, we're from the same neighborhood, we go to school together, we've been friends since daycare, doesn't mean I'll ride with you either.
No.
And for me, that just means, hanging out, getting in the car. I mean, I have family and friends.
Anything can go down at any moment.
And you don't know what someone else is doing. And maybe it's for me it's a little ingrained because I grew up trying to stay safe. And I know you mentioned this earlier, and my kids don't understand that now, because they've always been safe.
Yes.
It's a different
it makes
story.
A difference. Yes.
Right? But it's also because I make it a point to keep myself and my family safe.
Safe, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so family and friends, when those opportunities or when they've shown me that they can't keep me safe, we can't be friends anymore.
You have to learn from that.
We can always be family, but we can be family from a distance.
Yes.
You can't
Yes.
just get rid of your family, but we can be family from a distance.
You've given us a valuable lesson that so many need to understand, that yes, you love your family, and but look to those who are doing well. Look to those who you can follow their example, and it doesn't have to be just family. There's people all in the community that you can look to, even from afar off, and watch their life. And so tell us, how did you become so successful, having gone through what you went through as a child? What's your recipe for success?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a recipe, but I always just tried to stay safe.
That's one of the ingredients.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But I have a different perspective than a lot of people do too, because you know, just from the family that I come from, the place that I grew up, there was a lot of active gangs, and I have friends that to this day are either, you know, they're dead or they're in jail. And I don't necessarily know if I would be able to call them friends anymore, but I also have family, you know, cousins that I grew up with that are 30 years later are still in jail. So for me, it was, you know, making right decisions of not following them down those holes or those paths.
Yes, you hear parents all the time say, when their child gets in trouble, many parents say, well, he was or she was hanging with the wrong group.
And it's true.
And bottom line, our children have their choices, just as you as an 8-year-old can choose who they are around. And if they choose to be with the wrong group, then they're no better than the rest of the group. Because there's somebody else's child in that group that chose to be around the wrong group.
Sometimes that, you know what, maybe it's they just need to realize that they're strong enough to not be around that group.
Yes.
You know, you have to you have to feel you know, that it's okay to not put yourself in that situation. That, you know what, maybe they'll give you a hard time for not hanging out with them. You know, maybe they'll even try to bully you a little bit. But you know what? It's okay, because if I'm safe, that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
Okay, and a lot of folks who think like that are the ones who are able to go to the next level.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that really had a lot to do with you
it did.
being where you are now in life.
The best thing I did as a 17, 18-year-old is I went I always worked as a young man, but I got a job with UPS, loading and unloading trucks. And you know, it was a good pay rate at the time, and it kept me off the streets. It kept me busy. I worked at nights after school, so it kept me from being outside at those times. And they taught me. I quickly went into management, became a supervisor, and worked my way up. So I found something to latch onto.
Okay.
And you know, I did go to school, but I didn't finish, because as I started moving up, school didn't become as important. And so
we have about 30 minutes. So school wasn't important.
It wasn't.
But you are
I graduated high school, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so
it became important at some point.
It did. And what happened as I got married and I had kids. I worked about 80 hours a week, and it wasn't conducive to raising a family. And so I found myself leaving a great job with an associate's degree, and did not have enough education to match my experience. And that taught me another powerful lesson. Was that if you
needed more than an associate degree, you had to go
more.
Listen, we have run out of time, but my God, I would have loved to have heard even more of that lesson that took place. But the one thing I did hear is that you realized that even an associate degree was not enough, even though you had all this experience.
That's correct.
So it helped you go back and get it right and get it straight. And young people, we want you to get your education, because we know here in this country that is a big part of your success. If not, going back to college, make sure you get a skill and become very good at with your skill, and keep yourself busy so you do the right things at the right time. Doctor, we thank you so much, Dr. Sanchez, for you being so open and helping our community through your story. And we will definitely be having you back.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.